Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Pettitt, and who do I have the pleasure of interviewing today?
You are interviewing Paul Artale.
Excellent. And Paul, how long have you been doing some kind of diversity and inclusion work?
I will say about 15 years in different forms, 15 years, starting from my work as a special education teacher and way back when, and then evolved into trainings and workshops now.
Excellent. Wonderful. So, in this conversation, we're going to start off first with two kind of concepts that I've been grappling with. There's no wrong answer, but I'm really curious what your response is when I say the two concepts.
Sure.
The first one is the concept of diversity dividend. I hear this a lot when I talk with organizations about bottom line and money and that kind of stuff. But what does diversity dividend mean to you, specifically when thinking about investment, action, and return?
Good question. So to me, diversity dividend is largely, I think, those three steps, right? Invest in action and return. So it's the idea that we're going to consciously and strategically put into a diversity initiative as a company. They're going to invest. That means in its recruitment, in analyzing its employee culture, in looking at just how they construct their work environment. And then on the back end, the dividend piece is a work environment, a place where employees feel safe, where they feel welcome, where they feel they can be their true selves. I think, and then from a bottom line perspective, it's better retention. It's better retention. It's promoting from within, and an increased what I call the boomerang effect, which is pretty much because everyone today is talking about how millennials, a lot of people leave their jobs. No one sticks around for 40 years in a job anymore. But the idea is a lot of people might leave your company to go on to other things, but they still talk about your company, right? And so the other that there's a boomerang of like, you know what, you should go work for Dunder Mifflin. They're great, or don't go there because they're not inclusive of this, or they're just not a good place to work. So I think there's definitely some personal dividends, some sort of the soft and the hard. I think you can really benefit from investing in diversity initiatives.
It's such a great point for after when people leave. People don't think about that, but sometimes they're your best recruiters or not. My first text message today was to talk to someone about a company that I used to be associated with that had terrible, horrible, unethical management. Mm-hmm. And I haven't met with them yet, but my initial response is, well, they have a new owner and they have new management, so maybe it's not toxically awful. Yep. And in some ways, that's even worse, right? Than like back in my day, it was terrible. Mm-hmm. Is that I'm tainting the future. I have the ability to taint the future based on my past experience. That's a great point. Other concept-based question, sure. I think you're going to get a kick out of this one, is asterisks, other duties assigned. Uh-huh. So typically, I know, see? So
Can I swear? I want to swear on this. I just did.
It's okay. Swearing is completely fine. So what's interesting with asterisks, other duties assigned to me, is that I usually see this at the end of a job description so that a supervisor can kind of do whatever they want. But I also find if you have an identity that maybe is tokenized as one of the few, then you become like the unofficial chair of an affinity group. But none of that work is really compensated in how time or resources or labor are actually utilized, even if it's by choice. Can you talk to me about what asterisks, other duties assigned means to you?
Oh, well, it's generally it's a load of crap. I think, okay, the intent behind other duties as assigned is there could be a project or an initiative that is really important to the organization, or just might evolve naturally out of what you're doing, and that becomes another duty, right? I mean, that's the idea. That's how I interpret the idea. The reality is it does become the dumping ground for a whole bunch of unethical practices and uncompensated practices. Someone that worked in a field where that asterisk was like a joke and a running gag, and also, I also saw it was often used as an excuse to, hey, I need you to work this weekend and be there for, this event, and, it's other duties as assigned. So it becomes this mechanism that pretty much makes anything possible for an employee to do. So I'm actually not a big fan of it. I think not only from the employee sort of perspective, but I also think if you want to be a good strategic leader and run a strategic based unit, then other duties assigned can also be a crutch, because it doesn't have you think about what the best configuration of your staff is. It's just, let's just dump it on people. Now, going on to the diversity end of that, it does mean that if someone is open about their identity, or sometimes not, depending if they can hide it, it can put you down that rabbit hole. And I think the key word you said there is uncompensated action, right? So I mean, it's something that might look good to the org, but it's not something you, the employer, are going to get compensated for. It might not even show up on your annual review. Not that annual reviews are a good thing, but that's a whole other podcast. But I mean, it's to me, it hurts way more than it helps. And when you're talking about diversity work, so to use my example with disability, I've got these funny hands to get people to know. For me, it has been in a work environment something I was always very conscious and very vigilant about being or not being a part of, right? Because I didn't want to get lumped into that kind of work. And that I didn't, especially work that was, it's the sitting on the committee or being, like I said, being the chair of something that's not really a major strategic initiative. It's more of I call it a PR puff piece, right? Like we're going, hey, Paul, do something for Disability Awareness Week, because, we want to do something. I don't care what you do, but, you don't even have to have a title. We can just call it Disability Awareness, and you can come and you can run it, right? And so I'm not a fan of that marker at all, and I would challenge organizational leaders to think about, if you're going to give other duties as assigned, what's its true purpose, and in how you select folks for that, and then what it actually means to the organization.
Absolutely. And that's actually kind of a good transition to some of the conversations we had ahead of time. One of the things that you had mentioned is one of your stronger areas, which you're an incredibly strong trainer and speaker, but I liked how you worded this. And it's talking about the social construction of norms and identity, but then also using microaggressions or stories or examples of microaggressions as tools to understand the social constructions of norms and identity. There's a very nice kind of loop there. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, it started off, so when I started doing full-blown diversity training, especially training that focuses on ability, I wanted to do it in a way that A, was engaging, B, was funny, but C, actually could hit home with people, right? Because you need all three. It has to resonate. And so I found, for me, that the best way to teach social construction largely was through examples of microaggressions in my own life, or things we do all the time, myself included, right? And I think that's been really helpful in it, because I think when you're talking to a group who is in the case of ability and a lot of diversity topics, it's kind of taboo. Like, people aren't necessarily comfortable talking about that, and B, you got to find a way to have them resonate with at least your point of view and your experience. So I'm trying to find these commonalities. And to me, I thought, well, microaggressions might be a good way. So for me, it all started as I just tried something out there in front of a group, and it was literally like, tell me what this microaggression really means. And it was all things people have said to me, right? So, it's, like some of them I have up there, like, oh, you played football at the University of Toronto. Was that a touch league, right? Like, things like that. I talk about, the big one is, for me, people are like, oh, you have a child. Is he, like, ... fill in the blank. I'm like, no, my son's normal. He annoys me like all other kids. No, I love my kid. But so for me, it became a good touching point for people to understand that. Even something as simple as like, oh, I'm having such an ADHD moment today. I'm so ADHD. We all say this type of stuff, right? Or so and so, they're bipolar, right? So when I started diving into some of that, just how it's in our vernacular, it's in our language, right? That people just started being like, I get it. Even if they didn't necessarily agree, or they thought I was going over the top, they got where I was coming from. And I thought that was a really important part, point, and I just used it in my training ever since.
What resonated with me is the concept of things that are in our language that primarily able-bodied people don't necessarily even realize what assumption has to be made in order for this to work. So like I think about like when you say like blind spot. So even wearing glasses, I say blind spot and I don't necessarily even think about it as to what it means to actually have a blind spot.
Sure.
And who am I talking to? Who is my audience? Is there a different way of saying what I'm trying to say? That's what I loved about being able to say what the norms are, how they're related to identities, and then what is the possibly intended, more likely unintended impact of that kind of microaggression. I thought it was great. You also do a lot of work around norms and stigmas of disability. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about stigma. So, disability is something that, whether it's visible or not, first of all, it's an interesting identity because it's an identity that often is not someone's primary identity, right? So, like, it's not with me. If one could list identities in bullet form order, it would be fifth or sixth on my list, right? Like my immigrant heritage, my being a college athlete, like being a parent, like all of those identities are way more dominant in my consciousness than disability, right? And so that's the first thing I try to talk about is like, because the social, for when it's visible or known, the sort of the social expectations that that's something that's in their forefront all the time, and it's not, right? And so I chip away at that a little bit, but I really, when I talk about social constructions, that ability is largely, I mean, there's a medical model of disability because there are conditions, and that's that's part of it. But there is this other part of like how people react to it, how people think about it. Thinking about how different schools or office environments even approach the idea of accommodations, right? And to think about the more open a an environment is, the more likely someone is going to ask for an accommodation or feel comfortable or not feel like they're going to be stigmatized or just sort of tagged in some way, right? And so there's these things, trying to make people aware that the employee who walks into your office on some level might be completely comfortable with who they are outside of your office, but depending on your culture and your environment, they might not be at all the minute they walk through that door, right? That you can actually cause people to sort of regress in their identity. And that's having been in that situation, that is a weird place to be. When you have like pockets of places you feel comfortable being totally yourself and others where you don't, which kind of sometimes goes back to other duties as assigned, right? If you're asked to be on the diversity committee, are you okay with saying, you shouldn't have any fear, trepidation of saying yes or no either way, right? You should just be open. And so I talk about that, and I talk about like really you just think about like ability in the media, right? Like look at movies, right? Like 95% of all roles of disabled characters are characters with disabilities, are by able-bodied actors, right? I mean, it's and there's not a lot. And then if you parse out those roles, how many of those roles is the disability the prominent feature, right? And so it's not like I'm a Breaking Bad fan, but one of the things I liked about it from a sort of a social construction model was that the son who had cerebral palsy, and I believe the actor actually has cerebral palsy too, but that wasn't really a thing, right? He just happened to be a child with cerebral, and there's not enough of that in the media, right? Like there's just a lot of like, if they have a disability, then it has to be part of the character and the arc. And on top of that, there's not a lot of actors with disabilities out there. Not a lot of parts. Not a lot of parts for them, and then the ones that there are, they're taken by able-bodied actors. I mean, The Rock just did one where he played a character with a limb difference and things like that. So, anyways, I just go at it from like, look at the world that's been constructed around us, and look at it comes from an able-bodied perspective, and that's neither good nor bad, but it just is. But if you want to understand how to include individuals with disabilities, you have to understand the world we grow up in and the stigmas and all that, right? And that I always say it's interesting, like especially when you have physical disability, like in my life, talk about stigma or just expectations. Like anything I do something relatively minor, there's always a subset of people who find me inspirational, and then anytime I do something that's kind of cool, there's always like this questioning of like, well, was the standard lowered for you, right? So like I'm at like a grocery store the other day and I'm like taking like a can of soda, like a 12 pack, whatever. I just like kind of throw it in my cart and the woman's like, that's incredible. I'm like, what? She's like, you did that. I'm like, I did. I did. She's like, well, that's just amazing. I'm like, well, yeah, I worked my way up from 6 pack. Like, I don't know what to say, right? So, right. And I was like, cool. And then she's like, we're talking, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so, and she's asking me about my life. And I'm like, I'm pretty open. I don't really care. And so I was like, yeah, I played, I'm almost, I was 15 years martial artist and college football player. And then as soon as I said college football, she's like, oh, really? Did you play? I'm like, yeah, I played. She's like, how'd you do? Like, started like asking these questions, like trying to find the thing, right? Like I was,
Were you
so
like the token mascot, or did you like actually play?
yeah, then I grind. I'm sitting there going, I made it through training camp. A lot of guys jumped out, like, like, yeah, did I play and how did I do and all that stuff. And so like, and it's always there. And so if I can get audience, again, going back to using my experience, if I can get them to just understand the world, and that language matters, even unintended, even when you don't intend to be offensive or to hurt someone, that the language matters, and that if we can just be a little bit more conscious of it, then we're in a better place.
Absolutely. All right. So are you ready for my 2 favorite questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
First favorite question. What is something you've changed your mind about lately?
Changed my mind about lately? On anything, or are we talking diversity?
Anything. Go nuts.
Anything going nuts. Geez, that's really tough. Have I changed my mind about lately? I have changed my mind. I'm not a morning, on a very shallow level. I'm not a morning person, and I've changed my mind about that because it's the best time for me to get up, and the mindset of it. Not with that comes sort of the idea of like meditating, and the idea of just sort of like focusing to start my day was something I used to rip on all the time. And I saw it as hokey, but it's actually been really, really, really helpful. On a more serious note, I think the thing I've changed my mind about, I don't know if I changed my mind on it, but I think I've been more conscious of it, actually does come back to language. And as someone who has, I like to joke around and stuff. Sometimes I understand, I think I have a deeper understanding now of that words do matter, language matters, more so than I thought. It's not just about being correct, but I think the language we use does really shape the environment we are in. So I used to always see it as like a one-to-one. So like if there's an individual with some sort of identity or something going on, I shouldn't say that because there's a lot of good reasons why I shouldn't say that. And now I think I'm just looking at things more from this is not just about a one-to-one, making one-to-one relationships better, but it's also about making the environment I'm in better, which means I have sometimes sort of interjected in conversations with friends and stuff like that, which has led to some really cool convos.
That's right. All right. What do you absolutely know?
Nothing. I know nothing. That's the best play to be. I'm okay just sort of learning, and I think because I know nothing, I'm open to learning everything.
I'm smiling because that's like a very common answer.
Is it? I can change it.
No, it's totally great. I think it really showcases mindset in the field of doing this kind of work, right? Is that you have to question everything. And if you're questioning everything, you can't know anything. Anyway, all right, great job. Okay, now I had everyone pick 3 numbers. I have a product called Icebreaker cards that are easy, deep, or intermediate questions.
Sure.
So we're going to go through the numbers that you picked, and it's lightning rounds. Don't think about it very much. Just answer away. So E07 is intermediate. Share a life goal that you've set for yourself.
Life goal that I've set for myself, to be healthier, which has meant changing how I eat and how I get up in the morning, and just everything, just to be healthier so I can be around my kids more. Spend more time with my kids, because that's so easy to forget when you're like in the grind of doing this work.
Yeah, it is. Cool, great. Deep, number 45, is how do you know when you've fallen in love?
Because you can't think of anything else. It's like you become obsessed with it.
Mm-hmm. Don't take that the wrong way,
Yeah, yeah, not like I've been binge watching you on Netflix and like yeah, no, not like that.
though.
So,
Okay, and number 6, easy. Name the most beautiful place to which you've been.
mm, Florence, Italy. That's love Florence. Been a while since I've been there, but that's probably the most beautiful place I've ever been. And any football sideline I've ever been on, also the greatest place on
That's amazing.
earth. Yeah.
Well, that is pretty much our conversations. Thank you very much for being here. If people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
They can go to www.paulartale.com, and all my information is there, and we can have a conversation from there. And you can follow me on social media, Twitter at Paul Artale, Instagram. I think it's Paul. I just got Instagram, so like I know I'm catching up to like the year 2005, but I just got Instagram. So it's Paul Artale there, and LinkedIn, big on LinkedIn. So those are probably the 3 best ways if you want to engage with me directly or to go that way.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, Paul.
Thanks, Jessica.